Before we dive into this chilling tale, make sure to hit like and subscribe for more spine-tingling stories. You won't want to miss the true, dark accounts I'm about to share. So sit tight and let's begin. It was a cold autumn day in October 2023, somewhere in the quiet town of Thornfield, a small place tucked away in the middle of nowhere. You might not have heard of it. It's the kind of town that looks beautiful from the outside, but feels empty on the inside, like it's been frozen in time. I know this because I've lived here my whole life. And let me tell you, sometimes it's not the old town that gets to you, but the old houses. And this one house, on the edge of Thornfield, had always been ... different. I was sitting in my apartment, looking out the window. The gray sky matched my mood perfectly. Lately, I'd been feeling like I was waiting for something to happen. Something that would break the dull routine. I was just tired of the same old every day. That's when I saw the car pull up in front of the old house at the end of Oakwood Lane. At first, it didn't seem strange. People moved into the house all the time. But this time, something felt different. A family mom, dad, and their daughter got out. They smiled, full of hope, unaware of the fate that was about to catch up with them. I had heard stories. Everyone in town had. They said the house was cursed, the previous owners. Well, they didn't last long. Some said they were driven mad. Others whispered that they just disappeared. No one ever stayed there for long. But the new family didn't know any of this, at least not yet. I watched them unload their things, their laughter and chatter ringing out, completely unaware of the house's dark past. That night, as I sat in my living room, trying to keep my mind busy with work, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. It wasn't just about the house. It was the way the lights flickered outside, how quiet the street felt, and how the wind seemed to be whispering something I couldn't quite hear. Something about the house. Something about those people. I didn't know what, but it was coming. Something I couldn't avoid. I never believed in ghosts. Not really. I always chalked things up to my overactive imagination. But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about them. I closed my eyes, trying to push the feeling away, but it lingered, like a shadow I couldn't shake off. The house had never been ... right, but who was I to say? After all, it wasn't my life that was about to change. I heard the creak of a door in the hallway. I froze. No, it wasn't the wind. It was something else. I stood up, tension growing in my chest. Was the sound coming from my place, or was it coming from outside? I stepped over to the window, slowly, cautiously, and then I saw it. The house. The lights were on, but one of the windows on the top floor, ... There was something moving. I couldn't make out what it was, but it looked like a figure standing there, just staring down at me. My heart skipped. I shook my head, trying to ignore the panic rising in my chest. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. Just my mind playing tricks, but I wasn't sure. The longer I stared, the more I felt the grip of fear tightening. My eyes locked onto the window, and I could swear that the figure was smiling at me. A grin that I couldn't explain. It felt wrong. It was wrong. I pulled away from the window, my hands shaking, and tried to focus. I told myself it was nothing, a trick of the light. Maybe it was just a reflection. But as I moved away from the window, a sound broke through the silence, the unmistakable creak of old wood from the apartment above me. But there was no one living above me. The feeling came again, like a weight on my chest. There was something in the air, something that wasn't right. I couldn't sleep that night. Every little noise in my apartment, every distant movement outside, made my heart race. The next day, I tried to forget. But when I passed the house again, I saw the family still unpacking, still smiling. But there was something off. The daughter, the little girl, she was standing in front of the house, staring at me. It wasn't just a look. She was waiting for me to notice. I didn't stop. I just kept walking. but I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was watching me and the little girl. She wasn't supposed to be there. None of them were. That night I decided to take a walk, hoping it would clear my head. The wind had picked up and the leaves were swirling in every direction. I passed the house again, but this time something was different. The lights were off. The house, so full of life just a few hours ago, now looked dark, empty, but I couldn't leave. I was drawn to it, as if something was calling me to go closer. I found myself standing at the gate, staring at the old house in front of me, wondering if the family had gone to bed or if something else was going on. And that's when I heard it. The sound, faint at first, like someone whispering my name. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't my imagination. I turned quickly, but no one was there. Only the house, silent, waiting. It was then that I realized something. It wasn't just the house. That was cursed. The people living in it were part of something much larger, something much older, something that I couldn't fully understand. But I would soon enough. The following morning, I woke up with a strange sense of dread hanging in the air. It was as if the house had reached into my dreams and twisted them into something darker. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had happened there overnight. The air felt heavier, like the weight of something unspoken was pressing down on me. Even my coffee tasted bitter, like it was trying to warn me, though I didn't fully understand it at the time. I went about my usual routine, trying to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting back to the house. Every time I glanced out the window, I found myself looking at it, staring at that old, decaying structure, wondering what secrets it was hiding. I had lived in Thornfield my whole life, but this place had always been off limits, a quiet mystery that no one spoke about directly. By the afternoon, I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood to clear my head. As I passed by the house, I noticed something strange. The front door was ajar, just slightly. It hadn't been like that yesterday. I stared at it for a moment, wondering if the family had simply forgotten to close it. But there was something about the way it swayed in the breeze that felt wrong. It was as though the house itself was inviting me in. Despite the warning bells going off in my head, I found my feet moving closer. I knew I shouldn't, but there I was, standing in front of the house, looking at that door. For a second, I considered walking away, but curiosity had already taken hold of me. I pushed the door open gently, stepping inside. The air was different. In here, cooler, stale, the kind of cold that crawls under your skin. The house was empty, and yet it felt full. The walls, once white, were now yellowing with age. Dust settled on every surface, but there was something about the silence that made it feel like it had been waiting for me. I slowly walked through the hallway, my shoes creaking on the old wood floor. It was eerily quiet. Not a single sound except for the occasional groan of the house as it settled. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't bring myself to turn back. My legs felt like they were moving of their own accord, drawn deeper into the house. I reached the living room, and that's when I saw it. A photograph, lying on the floor, half hidden beneath an old rug. It was a family photo, just like the one I'd seen the day before, only this one was different. The people in the photo were smiling, but there was something unsettling about their expressions. They looked trapped, and in the background, standing in the corner, was a man I didn't recognize. His face was shadowed, but his eyes were fixed on the camera, and there was a faint smile on his lips. I bent down to pick up the photo, and as I did, I felt a chill run down my spine. It wasn't just the cold air. It was something else, something that made my skin crawl. It was like I could feel the man's gaze, even though the photo was only of his face. I stood there for a moment, staring at the picture, when I heard something. A whisper. Soft at first, barely audible. I couldn't make out the words, but it was clear it was coming from somewhere inside the house. The sound seemed to echo off the walls, a low murmur, like a chant. I froze. My pulse quickened. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I backed away from the photo, but as I did, the whispering grew louder. It wasn't just one voice anymore. It was more. A low, unearthly hum, as if the house itself was alive and breathing. My heart raced. I could feel something pressing against me, closing in from all sides. The walls felt like they were getting closer. I turned and ran for the door, but as I reached it, I stumbled. The door was shut. It hadn't been like this before. The door, which had been slightly ajar when I first walked in, was now completely closed. I gripped the handle and pulled, but it didn't budge. I panicked, tugging harder, but it felt as though the house itself had locked me inside. And then I heard it. A voice. Clear and chilling, right behind me. Double quotes, leave. While you still can. I spun around, but no one was there. The room was empty, silent. Again, except for the whispering that now filled the corners of the house, like it was coming from the walls themselves. I slammed my shoulder against the door again, harder this time, and with a loud groan, it finally creaked open. I bolted out of the house, gasping for air, and didn't stop until I was back on the street, heart still hammering in my chest. I looked back at the house, feeling a strange pull, like it was calling me back, but I couldn't go back. I couldn't. My mind raced as I walked quickly away. What had I just experienced? Was it real? Was it my imagination? I didn't know anymore. But one thing was clear. I had to warn the family. They were too new to understand the dangers, too unaware of what they had gotten themselves into. I didn't know what I was going to say to them, or how I was going to explain it, but I knew I had to try. That house was alive in ways that no one understood, and the family wasn't ready for what was about to happen. The days passed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was still with me, following me. The sense of unease was growing stronger with each hour, like something was waiting for me to make a mistake. I couldn't stop thinking about the family, the new family. They were completely oblivious to the danger they were in, and every passing minute felt like it was inching them closer to something they couldn't escape. I didn't go near the house again. Every time I walked past, I felt a heavy pull in my chest, a mix of dread and curiosity that made it impossible to turn away. The windows were always dark now, silent, like the house was holding its breath. I couldn't understand it. I was certain that something in that house had seen me, something that shouldn't be possible. That whisper, that voice. It had felt too real to ignore. On the fourth day, I decided to go and talk to the family. I didn't know how to explain the things I had felt, but I had to try. I needed to warn them. Maybe I was being paranoid, maybe I was overthinking it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that if I didn't do something, it would be too late. I walked up to the house, my footsteps echoing on the pavement. The front door was closed as usual, but I could see the faint glow of light through the curtains. I hesitated for a moment, then knocked. A few seconds later, the door opened, and Sarah, the mom, greeted me with a smile. She looked kind, but there was something in her eyes that made me feel like she knew something I didn't. She invited me in, and I stepped over the threshold, immediately feeling the temperature drop. It was subtle, but it was enough to make me shiver. The house looked different inside. The same dusty, decaying walls, but now there was a strange tension in the air. It felt off, like it was alive. I glanced around, unsure of what to say, but I could feel my heart racing. There was something I needed to say, something important. You Chu. I'm sorry to bother you, I started, my voice shaky. I just ... I wanted to make sure everything's okay here. This house, it's been empty for a while, and I've heard some things. Weird things. Sarah smiled, but there was something forced about it. We're fine, really. I know the place is old, but we love it here. It's perfect for us. It just feels right, you know? I nodded, trying to hide my growing discomfort. It didn't feel right. It felt wrong. Every part of me screamed that. They had no idea what they were dealing with. I know it probably sounds silly, I said, but there's something about this house. People used to live here before, but they ... They didn't stay long. I mean, things happened. Strange things. People talk about it. Some even say it's cursed. Sarah looked at me, her smile faltering just for a second. Cursed? She laughed softly, but it wasn't a real laugh. It was nervous. Come on, this house isn't cursed. It's just an old house. And it's going to be perfect for us, really. I could see the doubt in her eyes, but she didn't want to believe. She didn't want to hear it. And maybe, deep down, I didn't want to be the one to ruin their dream of starting fresh. But I couldn't ignore the warning signs. I had to say something. I know this sounds crazy, I said quickly, but you should be careful. I've lived here a long time. Well, this house, it has a way of getting into people's heads. It pulls you in, makes you think things are okay, when they're really not. It ... changes things. She shook her head, stepping back a little. Look, I appreciate the concern, but we're fine, really. Thank you for stopping by, but we're happy here. I stood there for a moment, unable to shake the feeling that I was talking to a wall. She wasn't going to listen. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the house wasn't what I thought it was. But deep down, I knew I wasn't wrong. I had felt it in my bones in that brief moment when I stepped inside. I left the house, feeling like a fool, but also more certain than ever that I needed to find out the truth. If they weren't going to listen to me, I had no choice but to dig deeper. I didn't know who else to talk to. I couldn't just walk away. As I walked back to my apartment, the street seemed quieter than usual. The trees were bare now, the wind howling between the empty branches. It felt like the whole town was holding its breath. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in that house. That something was waking up, and it wasn't just the house. It was the people inside it. There was a dark history there, and it was pulling them in. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that I was wrong. But the longer I thought about it, the more certain I became. Something had happened when I was inside that house. The whisper, the chill in the air, the photograph. They were all connected, and the family? They didn't know what they were walking into. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy feeling in my chest, like something bad was about to happen. I couldn't shake the thought of the family. Something wasn't right. It was more than just the house. The air around it felt wrong, alive, in a way that couldn't be ignored. As the days passed, the weather started to change, growing colder and more hostile. The wind howled through the streets, rattling windows, and the clouds darkened earlier than usual, swallowing the last bits of daylight. I tried to focus on my day, but the thought of the house was never far from my mind. I kept thinking about Sarah and her family, still so blissfully unaware of the dangers surrounding them. I knew I had to do something, anything to get through to them, but I didn't know how. They weren't going to listen to me after the way I'd been brushed off. So I did the only thing I could think of. I went back to the house. As I approached, I noticed the front door was open again, just like before. Only this time, the door swung back and forth, creaking with each movement. I couldn't tell if it was just the wind, or if something ... else was causing it. Hesitant, but driven by a need to understand, I stepped forward and walked into the house. The first thing I noticed was how cold it felt. The same icy chill I'd felt before, only worse. It was like the house had absorbed the cold from the outside and was holding it inside, wrapping it around me like a suffocating blanket. I tried to shake it off, but it wouldn't go away. My breath came out in visible puffs, and my skin prickled with unease. I walked through the dark hallway, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. The house seemed quieter than before, unnervingly so. The air was thick with silence, as if it was waiting for something. As I entered the living room, I stopped dead in my tracks. The photograph was back, but this time it was different. The family in the picture was no longer smiling. They looked hollow. The eyes of the man from the corner were now wide open, staring directly at me with an intensity that made my stomach turn. The photo, once again, seemed to pulse as if it was alive. I took a step closer, and then I heard a low, guttural sound coming from the back of the house. A whispering that made my spine freeze. My body was urging me to turn and leave, but something held me there. The whispering grew louder, filling the space like an invisible fog, and then I felt it. The presence. It was behind me. I spun around, expecting to see someone or something, but there was nothing. Just the empty house, yet I could feel the weight of it. The air felt thick, like something unseen was pressing down on me, tightening around my chest. It was as though the house itself was aware of my presence. I had to get out. Now, but before I could take a step toward the door, I heard it again, the voice. "You shouldn't be here." It wasn't just a whisper this time. It was a command, a warning. It sent a shock of terror through me. I didn't look back. I turned on my heel and rushed for the front door, my breath quick and ragged as the pressure in the air seemed to grow heavier. The door was still wide open, and I didn't hesitate. I ran out into the cold air, my heart pounding, feeling like the house was reaching for me, trying to pull me back. I didn't stop until I was safely back at my apartment. The chill still clung to my skin, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The house had gotten into my head, just like it had gotten into theirs. It had changed something in me. It was like I was connected to it now, like it was feeding on my fear. The next day, I tried to go about my usual life, but everything felt off. My thoughts kept drifting back to the family. I couldn't get the image of their hollow eyes out of my mind, or the way the photograph had seemed to move. Something was wrong. I had to go back, but I knew it was dangerous. I knew it was a mistake. Yet, I couldn't ignore it. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in bed, but all I could think about was the house, the whispers, the photograph, the man with the eyes that never blinked, the thing that had been following me. I couldn't stop myself from reaching for my phone. I dialed Sarah's number. It rang, and then nothing. No voicemail. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. Panic started creeping in. I wasn't just worried. I was afraid. I was scared that something had happened to them. I couldn't explain it, but I felt it deep in my gut. They were in trouble. I couldn't just sit around anymore. I grabbed my coat and headed out the door. The wind howled as I walked down the darkened street, the streets of Thornfield eerily quiet. I tried to ignore the voice in my head telling me to turn back. I knew I had to do this. I had to make sure they were okay. When I reached the house, I didn't hesitate. The front door was ajar once again. I pushed it open and stepped inside, heart racing. The house was darker this time, the atmosphere suffocating, like it was alive and breathing with me. I made my way through the house again, every step feeling like it was pulling me deeper into the darkness. But this time, there was something different. The house was still. No whispers, no sounds. The walls seemed to be holding their breath. I finally reached the living room, and there they were. The family, but something was wrong. They were standing in front of the fireplace facing the wall. Their backs were to me, their heads bent down. The air was thick, and their bodies were still, too still. It was like they were waiting. I took a step forward, and that's when I saw it. The man from the photograph. He was standing behind them, just outside their line of sight. His eyes were locked on them, dark and hollow, just like the last time I saw him. Before I could react, the room went cold. The temperature dropped so fast, it felt like I was suffocating in ice. The voice again, louder this time, "Leave now, before it's too late." Panic surged through me as the air grew colder. My breath was visible in the freezing room, but the family, The very people I had come to warn stood frozen in place as though they hadn't heard anything, like they were in some sort of trance. I could see their bodies, stiff and unmoving, their faces pale as ghosts. But it wasn't their expression that sent chills down my spine. It was the presence behind them, the man. The one from the photograph. He was no longer a shadow in the corner of the picture. He was standing there, just beyond the family, towering over them like a predator watching its prey. His eyes were wide open, dark voids that seemed to pierce right through me. His lips were curved into that same faint smile, an unsettling, predatory grin that didn't belong on a human face. I tried to move, to shout, to do something, but my body felt paralyzed. My feet wouldn't budge, as though the house itself was holding me in place, unwilling to let me escape. I felt the coldness seep deeper into my bones, a weight I couldn't shake. I had to get them out of there. I had to leave. Now. The voice was louder this time, forceful. It wasn't coming from the man behind the family, though it was coming from the walls themselves. The house was speaking, alive in a way I could never have imagined. The walls seemed to pulse, and for the first time I understood. The house wasn't just a structure. It was a trap. It had been waiting for them, just as it had waited for me. I took a hesitant step forward, trying to break free from the paralysis, but every inch I moved toward them made the pressure grow worse. It was like the house was sucking the life out of me, pulling every ounce of energy, leaving me weak and breathless. The air around me thickened as though it was being sucked out of the room, and I couldn't think straight anymore. Then I heard it, the softest sound, a low groan. The family's eyes flickered, just for a second. A movement so subtle, I almost didn't see it. It was Sarah, her head tilted slightly, as though she was just waking from a deep sleep. But it wasn't the Sarah I had known before. This one was different. Her eyes were cloudy, unfocused, as though she was no longer truly present. I knew then what I was seeing wasn't real, at least not in the way I thought. This wasn't a family standing here, it was an echo, an imprint of the family caught in the web the house had woven. They weren't alive. Not anymore. I backed away, horrified. The man, the thing that had been watching from the shadows, slowly started to step forward, his grin widening as he approached. I could feel his presence even though he hadn't touched me yet. He was still just a figure, a ghost, a nightmare, but his power, that was real. His gaze never left me, never blinked. "You should never have come back," the voice whispered in my mind. "It's too late for you." I was almost frozen with fear. I couldn't move, couldn't think. But then something inside me snapped. I remembered the stories, the warnings, the way people had talked about this place. And in that moment, I realized I had one chance left to survive. I wasn't just trapped in the house. I was trapped in its history. It had been feeding on the families who lived there, absorbing their fear, their lives, and it was hungry. But there was something else, something I had missed all along. The key to escaping, it wasn't running from the house. It was understanding. It, breaking the pattern. I stumbled backward, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I didn't know how I knew, but it hit me like a bolt of lightning. The house. It fed on fear, but it was also bound by its own rules. If I could uncover what trapped it, what kept it alive, maybe I could break free. Maybe I could save the family and myself. But I had to act fast. The man was nearly on top of me now. I could feel the cold breath of his presence like icy fingers, wrapping around my throat. The air seemed to close in, growing heavier with each passing second. Without thinking, I turned and ran. I didn't know if it was the right choice, but I had no time to question it. I bolted for the front door, my heart thumping in my chest. The man's voice echoed in my head, louder now. "You can't escape." I didn't stop. I didn't look. Back. The door slammed shut behind me as I dashed into the cold night. I ran down the street, not caring where I was going, only that I had to get as far away from that house as possible. But it wasn't just the house I was running from. It was the realization that I might never escape it, the thing that lived in that house. It had marked me, and it wasn't going to let me go so easily. I didn't stop running until my legs burned, and the night air seared my lungs with every breath. But no matter how far I went, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't free. That thing from the house, it was with me. I could feel its cold, like a weight pressing against my chest. I was being followed. I stopped at a park bench, hands on my knees, gasping for air. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over everything. The world around me felt too still, too quiet. It was like the entire town had fallen into a deep slumber. I tried to catch my breath, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. I kept seeing that man's face, the hollow eyes, that twisted smile. The whispering voice still echoed in my head, sending chills down my spine. You can't escape. I pushed myself up from the bench, needing to move, needing to do something. But as I stood, I froze. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't alone. Across the street, standing under the dim light of a lamppost, I saw a figure. My blood ran cold. The man. He was there, staring at me from across the street. His face was pale and lifeless, like a mask. The dark, hollow eyes locked onto mine, and I felt my knees go weak. No, I whispered under my breath, backing away slowly. My body screamed at me to run, but my feet refused to move. I was trapped. For a moment, he didn't move, just watched me, his expression impossible to read. Then, slowly he stepped forward. Each step was deliberate, each footfall echoing in the silence of the night. I had to get away. I turned and ran, panic surging through my body. But the streets, the buildings, everything felt wrong. The world around me twisted, stretched. The ground beneath my feet seemed to shift and pull in the wrong direction, and I stumbled, feeling the world spin. The air felt thicker, heavier, like I was running through some kind of fog. I could feel it, the house. It was pulling me back, just like it had pulled the family in. It wasn't a matter of running away anymore. It was a force, and it was relentless. I could hear the man's footsteps behind me, but I didn't dare look back. I just ran. I turned a corner and saw the old church up ahead, its stone walls looming in the night. The church had always been a safe place for people in this town, a place of refuge. Maybe it would be the same for me. Maybe if I got inside, I could escape. But as I ran toward it, something happened that froze me in my tracks. The church wasn't where I thought it should be. I had passed it countless times, but now the building was off, distorted. The road was no longer familiar. The streetlights, which had once been so clear, flickered like faulty bulbs. The air felt thick again, and I realized I wasn't running through my town anymore. I was in the house. Somehow, impossibly, it had followed me. The streets, the church, it had all turned into a twisted reflection of the house. I was back. No matter how fast I ran, no matter how far I tried to escape, I couldn't outrun it. The man's voice filled the air, louder now, filling my ears, my head. You're mine now. I spun around, desperate, but he wasn't there. The street was empty, silent. I was alone, or so, I thought. That's when I heard it, the whisper, soft and cold. It came from behind me, but it wasn't the man anymore. It was Sarah. Why did you leave us? She asked, her voice weak, distant, but unmistakably hers. I turned quickly, my heart racing, and there she was. Sarah, standing in the middle of the street, her eyes wide, her face pale as a ghost. Her body was hunched forward, her posture unnatural, like she was being pulled by some unseen force. She didn't look like the same woman I had met days ago. She looked broken, hollowed out. Sarah? I whispered, my voice trembling. What's happening to you? She didn't answer. Instead, she took a step toward me, her limbs jerking in unnatural movements. It was like she was fighting against something inside of her, but she couldn't stop it. And then, like a marionette, with its strings pulled too tight, she collapsed onto the ground, twitching violently. I ran to her, not thinking. I had to help her. I had to save her from whatever was happening to her. But as I knelt beside her, her eyes shot open, wide and empty, and she grabbed my arm with an unnatural strength. "You should never have come back," she hissed, her voice no longer hers. It was cold, inhuman. The grip she had on my arm was like iron burning into my skin. "It's too late for you, ... I screamed in pain as I tried to break free, but her fingers dug deeper, pulling me closer to her twisted face. I could feel the coldness of her touch spreading through me, chilling my bones. The darkness in her eyes was like a void, pulling me in, threatening to swallow me whole. And that's when I heard the footsteps again, the man. He was closing in, but this time it wasn't just him. The family, the echoes were all around me. Their faces distorted and wrong, their eyes empty, staring at me, reaching for me. They weren't alive, but they weren't dead either. They were trapped, caught in the house's grip, and now they were trying to pull me in with them. Everything went dark. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't sure where I was. The ground beneath me was cold and hard, and my body felt like it had been drained of all strength. The air was thick with a suffocating silence, and I could barely make out the shadows of figures standing around me. My head throbbed and my vision was blurry, but I forced myself to focus. I was back in the house. The walls were the same dark, decaying wood and the oppressive atmosphere that felt as though the house itself was alive, watching me. The dim light flickered weakly from the chandelier above, casting long twisted shadows on the walls. But there was something different now. The space around me was alive in a way it hadn't been before. It was like the house was breathing, pulsating with an unnatural energy. The family. They were still there, but their forms were more faded. They weren't entirely human anymore. Their outlines were blurry, flickering like a poor quality film reel. Their faces were like empty canvases, eyes hollow, as if they had been drained of all emotion, all life, and yet they were still there. Waiting, I pushed myself to my feet, heart hammering in my chest. The cold, the darkness, it felt worse than before. I could feel the house pressing down on me, suffocating me. I couldn't breathe. Every part of me screamed for air, for a way out, but I knew it was hopeless. I was trapped. Sarah's face flickered in the darkness. She was kneeling on the floor, her body twitching as if she was struggling against some unseen force. Her eyes were wide and empty, fixed on me. I could hear her soft, ragged breaths, but there was no recognition in her gaze. She wasn't herself anymore. Sarah ... I whispered, taking a step toward her, but she didn't respond. Her body jerked violently, and her mouth opened, letting out a guttural, unnatural sound that made my skin crawl. The whispers in the room began to rise, soft at first, but then louder, as though they were coming from everywhere at once. Get out now. Leave," the voices. They were all around me now, surrounding me, suffocating me. It was the house, alive with the cries of the people who had been trapped here. Their voices blended together, indistinguishable, as though the house had absorbed them, taken their souls into itself. They were the house, and the house was them. I spun around, looking for any way out, but the door was gone. The windows were no longer there, just dark, endless walls that pressed in from every direction. I was inside the house, and there was no way out. It was as if the house itself was closing in on me, its walls closing tighter with every passing second. And then, from the corner of the room, I saw him. The man. He was standing there as he always had been, watching, but now there was something different about him. His grin was wider, almost impossibly so. His eyes were darker, deeper, like black holes that seemed to pull at everything they looked at. He didn't move. He didn't have to. He was in control. This was his domain. You don't belong here, his voice echoed in my mind. But it wasn't just his voice anymore. It was the house's voice. The house was him. I tried to move, to scream, but my body wouldn't respond. It was as though the air itself was thick with something, holding me in place. I couldn't breathe. The darkness around me seemed to twist and shift, crawling toward me like an endless sea of shadows. The whispers grew louder, all of them speaking at once, their words garbled and distorted. Leave us. You shouldn't have come back. You will never leave. The house was feeding on me, draining me, just as it had with the others. And then I realized something that made my blood run cold. The house wasn't just trapping us. It was feeding off of our fear, our suffering. It didn't just want us here, it needed us here. The house was alive, a parasite that needed the souls of the living to continue its existence. Sarah was still kneeling on the floor, twitching violently. But now, her movements had changed. She wasn't fighting against the force anymore. She was part of it. Her body jerked forward with unnatural speed, and before I could react, she was right in front of me, her mouth open in a silent scream. I tried to back away, but her fingers shot out, gripping my arm with an iron-like strength. I looked down at her, her face pale and unrecognizable, and I saw the same hollow emptiness in her eyes that I had seen in the photograph. She was lost. She had already been consumed by the house, and I was next, but as her grip tightened, something inside me snapped. A memory, a flash of something ... A way out. It wasn't the house I had to fight. It was the curse of the house. I couldn't let it claim me like it had with the others. I had to break it, but how? I remembered the photograph. The family. The man. The photograph had been a clue, a symbol of the house's power over its inhabitants. The family was part of the house. They weren't just trapped, they were a part of the house's curse. I had to destroy the photograph. Destroy the symbol of the house's hold over us. Without thinking, I jerked my arm free from Sarah's grip and ran toward the flickering light of the hallway. The photograph. It had to be in the living room, right where I had seen it before. I had to destroy it. I didn't know if I had enough time, if I could make it before the house claimed me. But I had no choice. It was my only chance. I ran through the dark hallway, my heart pounding in my chest as if it might explode at any moment. Every step felt heavy, like the floor was sinking under my weight, as though the house itself was trying to drag me down into its depths. Walls seemed to close in around me, pressing tight as I moved, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't. The living room. It was just ahead. I could see the flickering light from the hallway stretching out, casting long shadows across the floor. But the closer I got, the colder it became. My skin prickled with the icy touch of something I couldn't see, yet I felt it deep in my bones. And then there was the photograph. It sat on the mantel, as it always had, its edges worn and faded, as though time had not been kind to it. The family, Sarah, her husband, their children staring out of the frame, smiling that same unsettling smile. And there, standing behind them, was the man. His face was barely visible, a shadow at the back of the family, but there was something about the way his eyes followed me, something chilling. It was as if he had been waiting for me, watching me all along. I stepped closer, reaching out with trembling hands, and as my fingers brushed the frame, I felt a wave of cold wash over me. The whispers were louder now, a low hum that seemed to rise from the very walls of the room. They were urging me, pulling at my mind, trying to drag me into their world. Destroy it. The voice inside my head whispered, break the bond. I grabbed the photograph with all my strength, yanking it off the mantel. For a moment, the air around me grew still, and I thought maybe I had done it. that maybe I had broken the hold. But then, the man's smile, the one that had haunted me since the beginning, twisted into something darker, something more sinister. You can't escape. The voice was in my ears, all around me, and before I could react, the photograph slipped from my hands. The glass shattered with a sharp crack, the frame splintering as it hit the floor. I gasped in shock, but that was nothing compared to what happened next. The walls of the house groaned, a deep, horrible sound that seemed to echo through every inch of the building. The floor beneath me vibrated, and the temperature dropped so quickly that I could see my breath turning into a cloud of vapor in the freezing air. The lights above flickered violently, casting the room into brief flashes of darkness. And then, it came, a shadow, massive, twisting, crawling, unfolded from the very walls themselves. It was not the man anymore. It was something else, something far worse. The air seemed to hum with a twisted energy, and for the first time, I felt the full weight of what I had come to understand. This house was a living thing, feeding off of the fear, the souls, the suffering of those who entered. It was not just a home, it was a prison, a trap for the living and the dead. I stumbled back, my legs giving out beneath me. The shadow loomed closer, stretching across the room, its form shifting and changing like liquid darkness. The whispers were deafening now, swirling around me, pulling at my mind, drowning me in an endless sea of sound. And then, I saw it. In the center of the shadow, the figure of the man. No, not a man anymore, but a creature. Its features twisted and deformed beyond recognition, moved toward me. His grin stretched wider, impossibly so, and his eyes burned with an unnatural intensity. "You are part of it now," he whispered, his voice a rasping, guttural thing. "The house will claim you." I could feel it then, the weight of his words, sinking in, pulling me into a darkness I knew I might never escape. But just as his shadow reached out for me, something inside me snapped. The house, this thing, wanted me to be afraid. It thrived on fear, and I was done being afraid. With every ounce of strength I could muster, I pushed the fear aside. I focused. I didn't know if it was the right thing to do, but I had to fight back. I had to. The thing in the shadows recoiled, as if surprised by my sudden resistance. For the first time, the darkness hesitated. "You can't fight me." But I didn't listen. I clenched my fists, focused every thought on one thing: breaking the curse. And then, without thinking, I screamed. It was a primal scream, full of everything I had left: anger, desperation, pain. The sound was deafening, a raw cry that echoed through the house. I could feel it vibrate through the walls, through the floor. For a moment, everything went still. The shadow recoiled again, as if it was being pulled back, like it was fading away. I didn't stop. I screamed again, louder this time, my voice ripping through the silence. The whispers, those voices, began to fade, their power growing weaker with every second. The figure in the shadows, the thing that had haunted me, began to lose its form, its solid shape twisting like smoke. And then there was silence. The air grew still, and the coldness faded, leaving behind only the sound of my ragged breathing. I slowly opened my eyes, half expecting to find the house still twisting and alive, its hunger unquenchable. But when I looked around, I saw something different. The house was quiet. The family was gone. The photograph broken on the floor was just a photograph. Nothing more. I was standing in the center of the room, alone. The weight of the house's presence had lifted. The darkness had receded, and I was no longer trapped in its grip. I had broken the cycle for now. For a long moment, I didn't move. I just stood there, breathing heavily, the silence around me so thick it felt almost unnatural. My heart still hammered in my chest, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something, somewhere, was watching. Emmy. I looked down at the shattered photograph on the floor, the pieces scattered like broken memories. The faces in the frame were gone, but somehow I could still feel their presence, lingering in the air. It was as if the house had absorbed them into its walls. I didn't know if destroying the photograph had truly broken the curse, or if it had only delayed the inevitable. But I had to leave. I had to escape before it came back. I stumbled toward the door, my legs shaky beneath me, my body still trembling from the adrenaline. The hallway outside was just as I remembered it, dark, cold, and quiet, but there was something different now. It wasn't the same suffocating atmosphere. It was like the house was holding its breath, waiting for something. I stepped carefully, not trusting the floor beneath me, afraid it would shift or crack as it had before. But nothing happened. The floor was solid now. The walls weren't moving. The house was still. I made it to the front door, my hand shaking as I reached for the doorknob. It was locked. Of course, it was. The house didn't want me to leave, but this time, I wasn't going to beg it for mercy. I slammed my shoulder into the door, once, twice, until I heard the wood splinter and crack. I kept going, my heart racing, my muscles screaming with exhaustion. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. And finally, with one last desperate shove, the door flew open. I stumbled outside, gasping for air, the cool night breeze filling my lungs, cleansing me of the suffocating darkness that had trapped me for so long. I was free, or at least I thought I was. I didn't dare look back as I ran down the path, across the overgrown yard, and into the street. The house loomed behind me, its dark windows like empty eyes watching. But then, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, and unmistakable. I spun around, panic rising in my chest as I looked for the source, but there was no one there. The street was empty, silent. The house was still behind me, its lights flickering faintly in the distance. But the footsteps, they were getting louder. Closer. I turned and ran faster, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The street seemed to stretch on forever, the houses blurring past me in the darkness. My legs burned, my lungs ached, but I couldn't stop. I had to get away. And then, it happened. I ran straight into someone. I stumbled back, my heart racing, but as I looked up, I froze. It was Sarah. Her face was pale and twisted, her eyes empty and lifeless. She didn't speak, but her presence was like a weight pressing down on me, heavy and suffocating. I could feel it, the house's influence, the curse still clinging to her. She was no longer the woman I had met. She had become a part of it. "You shouldn't have left," she whispered, her voice hollow and distant, as if it wasn't even hers anymore. I backed away, my chest tightening. "Sarah, no. This isn't you." But she didn't respond. She just reached out with one hand, her fingers cold and lifeless, and I felt that same chill I had felt before, the same sense of dread that had followed me through the house. The curse had claimed her, and now it was trying to claim me too. I had no time to think. I had no choice. I pushed past her, running harder now, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. I didn't dare look back, but then, in the distance I saw it, the figure of the man, standing at the edge of the street, his eyes fixed on me. His grin was wide, stretching impossibly far, and his shadow seemed to reach out for me, pulling me toward him. He was the house. He was the curse. I didn't know how, but I understood then that there was no escaping it. Not truly. The house, the curse, it would never let me go. It was a part of me now, a part of everyone who had stepped inside. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't give up. I ran until I couldn't run anymore, until my body was too weak, my mind too numb. I collapsed onto the side of the road, gasping for breath, unable to move, unable to escape. And then, just as I thought I might give in, something strange happened. The darkness around me began to fade. The air grew still, the weight lifting off my chest. I opened my eyes, unsure of what I was seeing. It was gone. The figure, the footsteps, the house, it had all disappeared. I looked around, dazed and confused, but nothing was there. No sign of Sarah, no sign of the man, no sign of the house. I was free, but was I? Was I truly free, or had the house just let me go, only to return later when I least expected it? I didn't know. I couldn't know. All I knew was that I had survived, and for now, that was enough. I didn't look back. I just kept walking, step by shaky step, into the uncertain night, hoping that somehow, maybe, I had outrun the darkness. The further I walked, the more unsettled I became. It was quiet now, but that quiet was not peaceful. It felt wrong, as if the silence itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Something I couldn't see or hear, but could feel deep within me. The weight of what had just happened, it was still there, pressing on me. I could still feel the coldness of the house in my bones, the whispering shadows clawing at the edges of my mind. Every step I took felt like it was leading me further away, but no matter how far I walked, I couldn't escape the feeling that the house was right behind me, lurking just out of sight. The street was empty. There were no cars, no people. Just the faint glow of streetlights that flickered intermittently as I moved past them. I tried to steady my breathing, to calm myself, but the panic gnawed at me. I had to keep moving. I couldn't stop. Not yet. I glanced over my shoulder once. More, half expecting to see the house looming behind me. But there was nothing. Just darkness. I thought for a brief moment that I was free, that maybe I had escaped. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. I could feel it. The house didn't let go of its prey that easily. I reached the corner of the street where the road split. One direction led into the heart of the city, the other down a quieter, darker path that seemed to disappear into the trees. I hesitated for only a second before choosing the city. I needed to find someone, anyone, who could help me make sense of this madness. But the closer I got to the city, the more I felt like I was being drawn towards something else. I tried to shake it off. No, I told myself. This wasn't happening. I was free, but then something changed. The air grew colder again, and the night sky above seemed to darken, the stars blurring into something unnatural. My steps slowed, my breath catching in my throat. The faint rustling of leaves echoed through the trees, but there was something off about it. It wasn't the normal rustling you'd expect from a breeze. It was more like scratching, like something was moving in the shadows, just beyond the reach of the light. I stopped. My instincts screamed at me to keep walking, but I couldn't move. Something was wrong. I could feel it now. The shadows in the trees were watching me, their dark shapes shifting and stretching unnaturally. They seemed to be moving closer, closing in around me. You thought you could leave. The voice was faint at first, just a whisper, but then it grew louder. The man's voice. The thing from the house. You can't escape. I froze. My body refused to move, even though my mind was screaming at me to run. The voice, it was coming from all around me, echoing through the night, filling the empty space. I couldn't tell if it was just in my head, or if it was real, but I could feel it pressing on me, suffocating me. I turned, my eyes scanning the street, but there was nothing, no one. The shadows around me were deeper now, stretching further into the trees, and the rustling sound was getting closer. Closer, you can't outrun it. My breath quickened, panic rising in my chest. No, this wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening again. I had left. I had escaped. But as I backed away, trying to put distance between me and the dark, I saw something that made blood freeze. It was Sarah. She stood in the middle of the street, her face pale and empty, her eyes locked on mine. Her mouth was open, but there was no sound, just a hollow, empty stare. Her hands were at her sides, twitching slightly, and I could see it now, the darkness. The house had marked her, just like it had marked the others. She wasn't Sarah anymore. She was part of the house. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The figure of Sarano, the thing that used to be her, started to slowly walk toward me. Her movements were jerky, unnatural. Every step she took was like a silent echo in the empty street. "You shouldn't have left," she whispered, her voice distant, broken. "You can never leave." Tears filled my eyes as I turned to run. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get away from her, from the thing that wasn't her anymore. But as I turned, I was hit with a wave of darkness, like something had grabbed me, pulling me backward. I struggled, tried to break free, but it was no use. The air around me thickened, the shadows in the trees closing in like hungry hands. I looked up, and there he was, the man. He was standing just ahead of me, his form now clearer than ever, his wide grin splitting his face like a grotesque mask. His eyes burned through me, pulling me toward him. "You thought you were free," he said, his voice like gravel scraping against stone. "But this is your home now, forever." The world around me spun. My legs gave out beneath me, and I collapsed onto the cold pavement, my mind racing, heart pounding. I thought I was free. I thought I had escaped, but I had been wrong. The house hadn't let me go. It was always with me. It always would be. And as the shadows closed in, I realized with a sickening certainty that no one who had ever entered that house had truly left. I didn't know how much time passed after I collapsed onto the cold pavement. The world around me seemed to blur, the shadows bending and twisting like smoke in the wind. I couldn't feel my limbs, couldn't move, couldn't think. It was as if I had been pulled into some kind of limbo, a place between life and death where time had no meaning. The man's figure loomed over me, his shadow swallowing me whole. His grin stretched wider, his eyes glowing with that same malevolent light that had haunted me in the house. "You're mine now," he whispered. His voice was everywhere, echoing in my head, in my chest, in my very bones. "There's no escape. You will never be free. Not from me. Not from the house." I wanted to scream, wanted to fight back, but my body was numb. Every part of me felt drained, like I had been emptied of everything that made me me. The thing that had once been Sarah, the thing that wore her face, stood motionless beside him, her empty gaze fixed on me. I could feel the curse wrapping tighter around my soul, its grip unrelenting. But in that moment, something deep within me flared to life. A spark, tiny but strong enough to remind me that I was still here. That I was still alive. The house had tried to swallow me whole, to pull me into its endless darkness. But I wasn't done fighting. I pushed myself to sit up, my body aching, my breath shallow. The man's figure loomed closer, but I didn't back down. I couldn't. "Not now, you can't break me," I whispered, my voice hoarse and weak. His grin faltered. "Just for a second. No one ever escapes me," he said, his voice dripping with malice. But there was something behind his words, something in his eyes, a flicker of doubt, like he wasn't entirely sure. Like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as broken as he thought, and that was all I needed. That tiny crack in his certainty. I looked up at the thing that had been Sarah, the one who had once been a person, a mother, a wife. But now she was just a shell. Her face was hollow, her body stiff with the unnatural stillness of the house's curse. I could feel the pull of it, that dark energy reaching out to me, trying to drag me back into the abyss. But I resisted. I had to. I grabbed the cold pavement beneath me, pushing myself to my feet, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a surge of defiance. I wasn't going to let them take me. Not without a fight. The man laughed, the sound echoing in the empty street, but there was a hint of something else in his voice. Something uncertain. Fear? I didn't wait to find out. I turned and ran. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. I just needed to get away. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to keep running, to escape the nightmare that had followed me, but there was something else pushing me forward. Something stronger than Fear. Hope. The road was still dark and empty, but the city lights ahead seemed to glow a little brighter, a little warmer. Maybe I wasn't as far gone as they wanted me to be. Maybe there was still something left in me to fight for. As I ran, I could feel the man's presence behind me, just out of reach. I could hear his laughter, growing louder with each step. But it wasn't as powerful now. It didn't feel as powerful. I was getting closer to the city. I could see the streetlights shining in the distance, the faint hum of life beyond the darkness. I had to make it there. I had to survive. Then I heard it again, the footsteps. But this time, they weren't just the man's. There were others. A chorus of footsteps all around me, growing louder, closer. I knew who they were, the lost souls. The ones the house had claimed before me. They were here now in the shadows, just waiting for me to slip, waiting for me to fall. I felt them, closing in, their cold hands reaching for me, their whispers clawing at my mind. I couldn't let them take me, not now. The city was so close. I could almost feel the warmth of the lights. I pushed myself harder, faster, my legs burning, my lungs on fire. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I could feel the darkness at my heels, but I wasn't going to stop. I wouldn't. And then, just as I thought I couldn't run any longer, I crossed the boundary. The line between the shadows and the light. I felt the cold grip on my chest loosen, the darkness retreating. The man's voice, the thing that had been him, faded into the distance. I stumbled into the city streets, gasping for air, my chest heaving with relief. The lights above me flickered brightly. The hum of the city was alive with energy, with life. I had made it, but did that mean I was truly free? I didn't know. The darkness, the house, they were still out there somewhere. Watching, waiting. I had escaped for now, but the nightmare was far from over. The house never lets go. Not really. But for the first time since stepping into that cursed place, I felt something I hadn't felt in days. A spark. A flicker of hope. I had survived. I was still here. And that, for now, was enough. The city lights felt almost too bright. Too sharp, like they were cutting through the lingering darkness inside me. I kept moving, my feet not quite touching the ground, as if I were walking on air alive, but still trapped in the remnants of the nightmare I had just escaped. I didn't stop. I couldn't. The fear hadn't left. It was still there, gnawing at the edges of my mind, pulling at me like the house itself was still somewhere, just out of sight, waiting. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see the man, his twisted grin, the empty face of Sarah, but the streets were empty, save for a few late-night stragglers and the occasional car driving by. I turned a corner, my heart still racing, my breath uneven. The city was alive with noise-honking cars, distant chatter, the hum of late-night shops, but it all felt distant, like I was in a different world entirely. The world of the living felt so fragile, so small, compared to what I had just experienced. I needed to talk to someone. I needed to tell someone what had happened. But who would believe me? Who would understand the madness that had consumed my life in the last few days? I kept walking, my steps automatic, my mind swirling with everything that had happened. The house, the shadows, the curse, the man, the thing that had been Sarah. I passed a small cafe, its windows glowing with soft light. It seemed like a safe place to rest, to catch my breath. Maybe someone in there could help. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The warmth hitting me like a wave, comforting but unfamiliar. The smell of coffee and pastries filled the air. A few patrons sat at tables, quietly talking or reading, oblivious to the storm I had just walked out of. I approached the counter, my mind still on the events that had unfolded. I needed something, anything, to ground me, to remind me that I was still in the real world. The barista behind the counter smiled at me, a friendly, tired smile that didn't reach her eyes. She looked at me, then quickly turned away, grabbing a cup for my order. There was something off about her demeanor, something strange in the way she moved. I shook it off, too exhausted to care. I ordered a coffee, something strong to keep me awake, to keep me alert. The barista handed me the cup, and as I reached for it, I noticed something. On the surface of the coffee, floating just beneath the froth, was a faint design, a pattern that almost looked like a symbol or a word. I blinked, leaned in closer, and gasped, "Dot, it wasn't a symbol. It was a face, Dot. It was Sarah's face, Dot. It wasn't just a face, though. It was the thing that had worn her skin. The thing that had been following me. The thing that had whispered in the darkness." Her empty eyes stared up at me from the surface of the coffee, frozen in that same hollow, vacant stare. I stumbled back, knocking over the coffee cup. It spilled onto the counter, staining the surface, but I couldn't look away from the face in the foam. I could hear the man's voice in my head again, faint but growing stronger. "You can never escape. The house always finds its way back." I felt the blood drain from my face. This couldn't be real. I was still here, in the city, in the light, far from that cursed place. But it didn't matter. It was like the house had seeped into everything. Its reach was everywhere. The curse had followed me. The darkness was never far. I could feel the presence behind me, the coldness creeping up my spine. I turned around, my heart pounding in my chest. But no one was there. The cafe was still filled with quiet patrons, completely unaware of what was happening to me. But the man's voice, it was getting louder now. "You thought you were free, but you're still mine." I backed away from the counter, my pulse hammering. The room seemed to spin, and I had to fight to stay grounded. I couldn't let myself lose control. I couldn't let the darkness take over again. I turned and bolted out the door, the city streets now feeling even more foreign, more threatening than before. I had to get away from the cafe, away from the face in the coffee, away from the voices. In my head, I ran, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. I just needed to escape. But I couldn't outrun the feeling that the house, the curse, was closing in on me, no matter how far. I went. I didn't know what to do. The house had followed me. The man, Sarah's face, they were all there, waiting for me, hidden in the corners of the world. I had thought I was free, but I was just running in circles. The darkness had always been a part of me, and now it was. Everywhere. Was there anywhere safe? I didn't have an answer, and I didn't know if I ever would. I ran. I couldn't stop myself, my feet pounding against the pavement, but the farther I went, the more my surroundings seemed to distort. The city, so full of life just a moment ago, now felt empty, hollow, as if it were a shell, and I was just passing through, not truly part of it. I glanced around at the buildings, the streetlights flickering like they were going out one by one. The world seemed to shrink. I could hear my breath, harsh and frantic, echoing in the stillness around me. And then, in the distance, a shadow moved. It was too dark to make out the shape, but I knew it wasn't just a person. It was too fast, too unnatural. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest as the shadow moved closer, and I didn't have to see it to know who it was. The thing that had been Sarah, the thing that had been following me, was here. It was watching me. "You can't run," the voice whispered, and I felt the chill crawl up my spine. It was the man's voice. It echoed in the air, filling the empty street like a sickness. "You belong to the house now," the voice continued. "You will never escape me. You'll never be free." I backed away, panic flooding my veins, but the shadow continued to grow. I turned and ran again, this time without looking back. Every instinct told me that I had to get away, but I was running blind. I didn't know where to go. The streets all looked the same. The houses on either side of me felt too familiar, too close, like they were all part of the same nightmare. And then I saw it just ahead, looming like a dark specter. The house, the same house, the one I thought I had escaped from. It stood in the middle of the street, its windows black and empty, its silhouette sharp against the night sky. The door swung open, beckoning me, as if it had always been waiting. I stopped. My feet wouldn't move. I couldn't run from it anymore. It had me. "Come home," the voice said, no longer a whisper but a command. "It's where you belong." I stood frozen in place, trapped between the house and the darkness closing in. I couldn't fight it. Not anymore. The house called to me. I didn't want to go in. I couldn't, but something inside me urged me forward, pushing me toward the door, toward the darkness that had been chasing me from the moment I stepped foot in this place. I stepped inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, a coldness enveloped me, and the door slammed shut behind me with a force that made my heart leap into my throat. The silence was oppressive, like the walls themselves were listening, waiting for something. I didn't know where to go, but I knew one thing. I couldn't stay still. I couldn't let myself become part of the house. The thought of Sarah, of what she had become, flashed through my mind. I could still see her face, hollow and empty, staring at me from the coffee cup. I walked cautiously, my footsteps echoing in the dark, the air thick with the scent of decay and rot. Each hallway seemed to stretch on forever, leading nowhere, and the more I walked, the more I felt like the house was alive, like it was feeding on my fear, pulling me deeper into its dark heart. "There's no escaping," the man's voice rumbled again. This time, it wasn't in my head, it was real, and it was coming from somewhere nearby. I turned, and there he was. He stepped out from the shadows, his twisted grin gleaming in the darkness. His eyes burned into me, and I felt the overwhelming sense of dread wash over me again. The air grew colder, and I shivered, but I didn't run. "Not yet. You've come home," he said, his voice almost tender, mocking. "This is where you belong, forever." I backed away slowly, but my feet wouldn't move fast enough. My legs felt like they were made of lead. The darkness pressed in around me, and I knew there was no escape. The house had claimed me. I had nowhere left to run. But then, a flicker of light. It wasn't much, but it was enough to pull me back from the edge. The light came from a small crack in the wall at the far end of the hallway. The man was still moving toward me, his eyes never leaving mine, but the light, it drew me in. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a sliver of hope. I bolted toward it, ignoring the pain in my legs, ignoring the suffocating darkness that seemed to press in from all sides. I reached the crack, my hands trembling as I pushed against the wall. It was as if the house itself fought me, but I didn't care. I had to get out. And then the wall shifted. It moved, revealing a narrow passage leading downward. Without thinking, I squeezed through the opening, the light guiding me as I descended into the depths below. The stairs creaked beneath me, and the air grew thick with dust and must. The further I went, the more I felt the weight of the house pressing down on me. But there was something else. The shadows that had been stalking me. They weren't just following. They were waiting. They were waiting for me to make a mistake, to slip. I knew that, but I had no choice. I had to keep moving. I reached the bottom of the stairs, and what I saw there made my blood run cold. It was a room. But not just any room. The walls were covered in strange symbols, symbols that looked like they had been drawn with blood. And in the center of the room stood a pedestal, its surface slick with something dark. Something wrong. On the pedestal was a single object, a key. I didn't know why, but I felt drawn to it. It felt like it was the answer I'd been looking for, the key to everything. I reached out, and as my fingers brushed against the cold metal, I felt a jolt of energy. Like the house itself had just shuddered. It was the final test. The house was offering me a choice: take the key and risk whatever the consequences might be, or leave and face the endless torment of its curse. I had no choice. I grabbed the key. The moment I touched the key, The house reacted violently. The walls seemed to tremble, the air thickening with an unnatural force. The shadows moved in on me, quicker now, closing in, suffocating. But I didn't let go of the key. It felt like it was pulsing in my hand, almost alive. I held it up, and the room seemed to shift. The symbols on the walls began to glow, faint at first, then brighter and brighter until the whole room was bathed in an eerie light. The man's voice, louder now, filled my ears. "You can't escape, you can't win. The house owns you." But I wasn't listening to him anymore. I was listening to the hum of the key. The key was the power. It was the way out. I rushed to the pedestal, slamming the key into a slot at the base. There was a violent flash of light, and I was thrown back. For a moment, everything was nothing, no light, no sound, just emptiness. And then, everything stopped. The darkness around me evaporated. The house was gone. The shadows receded. The man's voice was silenced. I was standing in the middle of an empty, quiet room. The key, still clutched tightly in my hand, had done what I couldn't. It had freed me. I wasn't sure how or why it worked, but I didn't care. I was free. The house, whatever it was, whatever it had been, was gone. The curse had been broken. I had survived.